Okay, here we go. I'm going to start the recording that I created before. And I've called it Charcoal Studies. This obviously is a painting that I did in oil. And these are a few of the studies that I've done. Some of them turned into paintings, some of them didn't. Many of them were just exploratory, where I was just playing around. These were one figure that got put together. Same here. Just, you can see sometimes more detail, sometimes less. Here's one where I just followed the photograph that was there. I try to not rely, this is made up out of my head. I try to not rely on photographs. I paint more from life than from photos. But for the purpose of this demo, I want you to see what I'm working from. And I want to talk about no-tans. So no-tans are basically light and dark. Well, actually light and shadow is a better way to put it. So see how this photograph can be turned into light side, shadow side. And here we have another light side, shadow side. Okay, so take a look at that. Notice how we can read that it looks like a pear. Our brain tells us that that's a pear. And those are very, very simple shapes. So this has been absolutely simplified. It's one object that's been simplified down into light side and shadow side. Now, if the background was also light, we'd still be able to read this if this line were here. But the idea is that if you have light and light, you don't put a line in, like I've got right here. See, there's no line. That's a lost edge right there. And our eye goes through paintings and works of art through a lot of these lost edges, right? And then also things that are connected. So the darks are connected here and the lights are connected here. Okay, so here's the image I'm going to use, and you'll notice how much easier it is to look at it in grayscale. So we see the shadow, light, and midtones. And there's a line drawing of it. I'm just going to pause on here. The pausing, we're sorry about the letters coming up all the time, but I do want to pause and speak a little bit about certain things as we go, because it's important for you to know the process I use if you want to give it a try yourself. You can tell the large shapes are this is a large shape of light right here. This is a large shape that falls into shadow, although much of it is actually a dark midtone. And then you can see I've only included the important smaller pieces towards the center there. Okay, so here we have, if you take a look at this for a moment, like I was just saying, we have light, shadow, and midtones. Now midtones can be in the light. So for example, here, this one is in the light. Over here, this is actually technically in the light. The sun is shining down on here, but it's a dark object to begin with. So it's also a midtone. So we have light midtone. Here we have shadow. This whole side over here is in shadow, yet some parts of it are quite dark and some are less dark, but they still fall into that shadow side. So if you're going to do something like this, which is a mass no-tan, so a no-tan is when you just have light and shadow. This does have light and shadow. It also has midtones. And because if I were to just do this as light and shadow, there would be a bunch of information I would be missing. I need these midtones in here to be able to read this. So I've included them. Now, I encourage you to try this, even just start with photos and block out the geometric shapes of tonal value. And you can even give them a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I wouldn't go past 5 tonal values though. You're starting to get into way more than you need. Usually a no-tan, it just means black and white, so it's 2. But a mass no-tan can have 3 tonal values, maybe 4, and at the very top end of it, 5. Okay, so you can pause this if you want to see the list of supplies and write it down. The watercolor brushes are optional. Make sure you're using artist charcoal, not the edible charcoal. And there's the chamois. That one's made out of, I believe it's sheepskin. I've tried a lot of different chamois, car chamois and stuff, and they really don't work very well. Also splurge on the paper. Don't get the student charcoal paper. For, you know, for $1.50, you can get a large piece of Canson charcoal paper. I get mine from Opus. I think it's like, yeah, like $1.50 or so. But what I'm doing right now is just massing in the general shapes. And if you look up to the left-hand corner there, you can see that plan that I created, that I just showed you, which is my 4 tonal values. Now I'm just integrating so I don't end up with too many pools of powdered charcoal everywhere. One thing I love about this is I get to get my hands in it. I don't get to get my hands into paint. So here's the Kneadable Eraser, and I'm just pulling out the lights. So I put a mid-tone down everywhere, and just flip your eye up to that upper left-hand corner so you can see what I'm following. And the harder you press, the more of it comes off. If you want a whole bunch to come off, you can use one of those white erasers, or if you want a really strong line. But once again, I encourage you to not use anything that has a point. You know, get your eraser molded into a shape, size, shape that you want, and then lay your mark down and leave it alone and move on. So once again, going for large shapes first. You know, if you're going to try this, do just one pair first. Don't make it too complicated from the start until you get used to how this works. See, I keep moving that kneadable eraser around in my hand to get it to a different shape. The charcoal does build up in the kneadable eraser, and over time it won't be usable anymore, but they do last for a long time. See how easy it is to do just one line. So see how it's all really big shapes right now, the major structure. So now I'm doing some more sort of measuring and going into the smaller shapes. And this is a photograph I took in China. So that man was standing there and I couldn't see what he was looking at, but he's outlined, or he's situated in the light. Now that is a piece of compressed charcoal. It's quite soft. It's not the hard kind of compressed charcoal, but it's beautiful for getting some darker tonal values in there, as you can see. The powdered charcoal just doesn't go dark enough on its own. Once again, the harder you press, the more comes off, keeping everything very structural, basic shapes. And we're aiming for those 3 tonal values at the start, right? Light, mid-tone, and shadow. It's all about simplifying it down. And yes, this will get you to practice your drawing skills, which is a great thing. And watch what I'm doing with my hand position, right? I put a mark down, leave it alone, and then move somewhere else. You know, paintings can get way too unified and end up boring as a result. So just put a mark down as your best guess for the moment. You can always take it off. That's the beauty of this. I can change my mind later. In fact, I don't have to worry about this drying on me. So I can start a powdered charcoal drawing and leave it halfway finished, no problem, and get back to it another day. So blocking in lots of tones. So I'm really getting light side, shadow side. And just leaving a few of those midtones and become half tones. So notice the variety of mark making. I'm not just filling a whole section in with flat tonal value. Here we go. This is, I wanted to get the texture of the wall that I was remembering. So notice how I'm using the side of the compressed charcoal. I'm not ever using the end of it. And there's more texture on that wall over there. And it's quite, that all falls into shadow on that side, on the left. So I'm pressing harder, but I didn't just do it in one big swipe. I want it to stay interesting. I'm trying to get a sense of the mood that I want to have. And while these drawings are, you know, kind of on a right on their own, they're a piece of art, of course. I'm doing a lot of this in preparation for a painting. And I'm also getting a sense of, you know, is this interesting enough for me to actually do a painting of it? If I lose interest in a composition by the time I have finished a powdered charcoal sketch, I know that I'm not going to paint it. I didn't skip any steps there. I just had to take a break. I don't like it when you're watching something and there's a big gap and you realize that they didn't show you a part that was really important to see. Okay, so here's the sort of smallest detail that's going to be in there. That's the head of the guy who's standing there with the basket that he's holding behind him. For those whose left brains need to figure out what's what. But I realize that the left brain likes to kick in, but really try to stay in right brain mode when you're just looking at shapes of tonal value, you're looking at line, you're looking at texture, you're looking at all of these various elements of design. And just be free and intuitive. So here we go, I'm measuring, I measure like that a lot. They're called comparative measurements, where I'm double checking the height of one thing against the height of something else. And so if I need to change it, it's quite easy to do so now. So see, I realized, oh, that needs to go up higher. I didn't have that door frame up high enough. So easily changed. You can go in too early with too much dark. So get a sense of where you really want your darks to be before you go in heavy with the strong black compressed charcoal. right, so all the major shapes are blocked in, just about. Just count how many tonal values you see. Obviously there's some variety, but so I'm going to start blending here. And the reason for doing this is to push some of those darks into the paper so that they'll stay there. Another reason is to soften a lot of the edges. So when I paint in oils, I keep my edges very soft through most of the painting. And then I come back in with hard edges as I go. So that's just a personal preference. As you can see, it could have been left as it was. Just depends on what kind of look you want. But you'll see where this goes in just a sec with the softness. I'm also simplifying some of the shapes. If anything got a little too much variety happening inside of it, like if there's, I'm just unifying some of those tonal values to keep them simple. Right, all the way up the shadow side of him and then into his basket there. And you'll notice I'm going to be covering up some of the light areas. And that's actually necessary to do because in order to get those mid-tones or even just half tones in the light areas, I need to put some kind of tonal value down and then pull out the lights again. So see how it just kind of unifies it? Now, I still want some of that texture to come through the paper. Oh, I don't use vine charcoal for this because I find it goes a little too brown. It has kind of a brown look to it, and I prefer, and this one does a little bit, as you can see, but less so than the vine charcoal does. There you go, just get your hands right in there. And notice how I'm following the form of the wall. So before I went vertically, and then my strokes went horizontally. And everything that you're seeing here that I'm doing with my finger, I would do when I'm painting, but not with my fingers. I do it with a brush. So remember before I was talking about touch. And powdered charcoal is amazing because if you touch something too much and too often, it just dies. And then you have to get it back to life again. But it's really easy to practice getting it back to life again. Whereas with paint, you can start mucking about and things can go kind of gray. Okay, so watercolor brush. I use that if things are starting to get a little bit too precise or perhaps too unified. In other words, a little bit too boring. So this just kind of shakes it up a little bit. You'll see what happens. It's a very large, well, relatively large brush. Just because I want some more mark making to happen across. And I'm pretty much covering up all the light areas and turning them into, they're still falling into the light side, but they're tonal value of 2 or 3 and possibly even 4. And then come back in with the eraser and pull out those lights again. So kind of like the old Karate Kid movie of wax on, wax off. It's, you know, powdered charcoal on, powdered charcoal off. And the idea behind this is you don't actually want to be too precise too early. What you want to do is build those layers and get movement and texture and interest, you know, places for the eye to go. How are you going to move the viewer around your painting? And if you can sort this out ahead of time in every way except color, then you can go and create something called an underpainting using just one color of paint. I often use burnt umber or asphaltum or burnt sienna. And I do exactly this process. It's just that I use a, well, you'll see later some of my underpaintings that I show, but I use a brush to put the paint on rather than a chamois. And I use a cotton cloth to take the paint off rather than a kneadable eraser. And everything else is just like this. Same feel, same movement around. Putting paint on, pulling paint off. I just find it incredibly liberating. But be patient with yourself. If you're not getting things to look just as you want, it's okay. You just keep going. Oh, and the other thing is, the more you can practice painting this way from life and drawing this way from life, the better. Those of us who jury can often tell when something was done from a photograph, and you need to get away from those mistakes that are made when looking at a photo, because the camera does not see the world the way we do. So if I only want to take a little bit off, I only just gently touch it. If I want to take a lot off, I really push hard. See, I'm kind of just scrubbing. There we go, a lot coming off there. Look at the details that you can get from that, you know? Or they read as details. They're not actually, they're just small shapes. So some people, some of my students sort of panic when I do something like this, even on their paintings, when I say like, just wipe that out or wipe right across there, because it feels like you're going backwards. The reality of it is sometimes you need to feel like you're going backwards and actually to progress forward and make it better. So be free with this. Allow yourself to lose edges and then try to get them back again. And if you can't quite get them back again, keep trying. You know, you'll train your eye to see, and eventually you won't need to do drawings underneath anything anymore. And man, is that a time saver. I hardly ever do a drawing underneath a painting now. I do this. It's so much more fun. Part of the reason I jump around a lot is it's the way my brain works. But it's also so I don't get too fixed into one area. The more we look at one spot, the more we start to see as far as the details of it. And I don't want to do that yet. And I can tell by what I'm putting in right now that I'm looking at the photograph, which is just to the right. I don't think you can see it there, but I'm looking at a grayscale photograph of the image now. So I started with the mass no-tan that's on the left there, and now I'm moving into more sort of the detail-y bits that are important. So once again, what you leave out is just as important as what you put in. And this will help you practice that. So now I'm putting in the light that's in behind the figure. using mostly straight lines. That's important for the structure and geometry of it. Things tend to feel a bit more real if you use straight lines to render them, even just if at first. So you can see I put a lot of dark down in some places, and I have to push really hard to get the powdered charcoal off. But it still comes off. And I don't want any of that to go to pure paper anyway. I want it to have some tonal value on it because it's in the light, but has a tonal value of 2 or 3. So when you look at this, you can see light side, shadow side. Within the shadow side, there are 2 main tonal values. And within the light side, there are 2 main tonal values. Okay. So that's as far as I'm showing for this demo. Just check out, there's the powder on the right-hand side and the kneadable eraser. And look at all the movement happening through there. I'm getting a sense of how I want the viewer's eye to move through the painting, what I find interesting in the painting. And I can then take all of this information that I just did in 1 hour and create an underpainting. Now, I don't do this for every painting I'm going to do, or every painting I'm going to create. Sometimes I just do this in the underpainting, but I especially do this if something is going to be quite complex. If I'm putting multiple subjects together in a way, and I'm not quite sure how I want it to work, I'll play around with it this way before I even put paint onto a canvas or onto linen. So just look at the mark making there. Okay, so like I say, charcoal studies are practice and prep to create underpaintings. So here are just a couple of examples of underpaintings. This one, that one was a Schwaltum, that one's in burnt umber, with does have white and gray on it too. This was a one-man preparation for another painting. He was just gonna be part of another painting. And then these underpaintings become paintings. So here are just a few examples. So the powdered charcoal leads to the underpainting leads to the finished piece. Very step by step. All right, if you want to learn more, see any of the courses I have coming up, you can go to my website, lalitahammill.com. I'm on YouTube, just my name, and Instagram, Lalita Hamill Artist. And I also want to throw in there that I'm being featured, I've been featured on Banging Rocks TV on YouTube. So if you type in my name and Banging Rocks TV, it's episode 3. So it's an hour of just listening to me talk, which was very odd to do. Okay, so I would like to thank you for watching, and I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope you feel inspired, and I would love to hear from you to find out how this powdered charcoal thing has gone, or if you even tried it. I love to have conversations with people, especially in this time, you know, when we are not really around people very much. So enjoy, keep drawing, keep painting, and stay healthy.